Good afternoon to all. I'm Bill Raish. I'm most happy to be joining you from our Intercept Center at NYU, where we focus very much like this conference on bringing together key stakeholders on neutral ground to collaborate on shared challenges and threats. The current and certainly continuing pandemic presented a wide spectrum of challenges to all our organizations. We've had successes and failures and much in between as we navigate through these difficult times. We're looking at some of those challenges and lessons learned today through four distinct yet arguably complementary lenses. We have Lieutenant Colonel Matt Cavanaugh, an Army strategist and also academic, who is joining us from Northcom NORAD. He will bring a wider global military perspective to the equation. Joining him will be Jason McNamara, Director of the Center for Emergency Management Operations at CNA Corporation. Jason brings a tremendous depth of experience and knowledge from decades of interaction with local, state, and federal emergency management. Joining as well will be Catherine Boatwright. She is Director of Operations for the National VOAD, and with her comes a perspective on the not-for-profit and NGO community, which has certainly served vital roles throughout this ongoing crisis. And then finally, we have Colonel Brandie Williams. She's Chief of the Plans Division of National Guard Bureau. She brings with her the distinct lens that the National Guard has from its unique role in serving both on the state level, if you will, the local level, and responding to emergencies, as well as certainly warfighting when called upon. From these diverse perspectives, our goal will be to tease out real world and very fresh lessons learned from the ongoing pandemic, with a focus on maybe some actionable insights and strategies going forward that all of us in the greater community can potentially apply. We've only got about 3 to 5 minutes for an overview from each of our thought leaders here, but we hope to have a little time at the end of our discussion to respond to questions and certainly welcome them throughout via the chat function. I'm going to mix things up a bit and suggest a reverse order from your program and ask Colonel Williams to lead off. Colonel Williams, what, from your perspective, have been the greatest insights and lessons learned from the National Guard during this past 18 months or so?
Good afternoon, Bill, and thank you for that great introduction. And so it is my distinct pleasure to sit on this panel to talk about an extremely relevant topic as we learn to navigate the new normal. The theme of the whole of community response in a post-pandemic is definitely fitting and correlates to the mission and role of the National Guard. Because we pride ourselves in being citizen soldiers and working side by side with our state, local, tribal, and federal partners to provide a service for the local communities. The National Guard, by its very nature, is the connective tissue between the military and the community that we live and serve in. So the COVID pandemic has definitely challenged the National Guard men and women to think out of the box, to create and innovative and skills that we acquire through both the military and our civilian jobs, and to apply those unique skill sets into a different way. So all of the unique challenges that the COVID pandemic has placed on our organization and apply those and be unique and also have to go with others. For example, when about PPE requirements, National Guard became increasingly creative. We began, guardsmen in California and Colorado began sewing face masks for the National Guard soldiers and airmen. And then as we created so many, we started to distribute that vital resource to our communities. We also embrace virtual collaboration tools, and these tools have enabled us to continue to do our operations. And it also helped us no longer be restricted to geographical boundaries that we see in traditional settings. Going forward, I do believe that the biggest challenge that the National Guard will face is managing our role in support of the Homeland Defense while also providing a vital service in our defense support to civil authorities. We have to learn how to live post-pandemic while also responding to national incidents such as hurricanes, wildfires, flooding, and civil disturbance. Relying on our limited resources that most of my comrades understand and live through on a daily basis. But with the National Guard, we also have to conduct readiness training to meet our federal obligation. Some of the other challenges that we also identified was building enhanced information sharing tools, conducting collaborative training, and also how do we reach out to a wider range of partners from all sectors of the community and government. And I believe that if we focus on these efforts to ensure continued success for us all, we as an organization and as a broader community can learn how to overcome the obstacles that we're facing now and learn how to navigate this new normal. In many ways, I believe the pandemic has strengthened us, not just the National Guard, but all of our partners. And I'm confident that the challenges that we have faced and continue to face will only strengthen our ability to better plan and respond to multi-layered incidents as a whole of community partners. The importance of this shared and renewed sense of purpose, it will promote inclusion, innovation, collaboration, teamwork, mutual trust, and mutual understanding, which I believe are keys to success in living in a post-pandemic era. Now, please do not get me wrong. I am by no means saying that the pandemic is over. But what I am saying is that we need to capture those lessons learned, and in capturing those, apply those lessons learned so that we learn how to operate in this new environment. We should never try to go back to pre-pandemic operations, but continue to utilize and incorporate all of the skills that we have acquired to enhance what we do and to help us better manage and prepare for the challenges of the future. I'm proud of the work that the National Guard has done. Not only did the National Guard support its communities, but the nation as a whole. We take this charge not lightly. We do it with enthusiasm and excitement because we take pride in what the services that we provide to our nation and the communities. And I believe that as we move forward, we will only strengthen and rely and learn from our partners to do more for the community. So thank you for my time, and back to you, Bill.
Colonel, thank you very much, and sincere thanks to you and all your comrades for your tremendous service throughout this crisis. Catherine Boatwright, you're head up operations at the National VOAD. There, you've got a wide range of not-for-profits and NGOs that have been extremely active and impactful throughout the crisis. What do you think the greatest lessons learned have been both for and from the VOAD community?
Well, thank you, Bill. And this has been a tremendous time, right? None of us came out unscathed as to the pandemic, the economic impact, and the natural disasters that followed. I would say that the one thing that is a takeaway is that the nonprofit sector will do whatever it takes to continue to serve the population that it serves. We saw nonprofits, first of all, taking their full workforce digital, which when we're talking about people who rely on human connectivity was a huge lift. We're talking about nonprofits who specialize in construction are all of a sudden sewing masks. Nonprofits who are delivering meals are now running restaurants and helping to keep those small businesses afloat by using funds that they would have normally used for direct feeding to paying restaurant workers. So just tremendous creativity. And I hope that we never lose that. I will say that we have a few challenges on the horizon for us. And that is, in everything that we do, we thrive on partnerships. National VOAD works to incorporate the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, coordination, and cooperation into everything that we do. And that's true across industry lines as well. One thing that we are looking at is in March of 2020 of this year, Candid released a study along with the Center of Disaster Philanthropy stating that it's possible that 1/3 of nonprofits could close within the next 2 years because of financial instability. That is a huge number. And when we're talking about the most at risk of that number, it's those smaller community-based organizations. Now, for every day, you may think, well, not a big deal, they have a small impact. However, they are the most integrated in their community. They have the most knowledge of the local culture, resources and relationships. And for national nonprofits in a response and recovery setting, they are who we partner with to make sure that we are doing the most good for that local community. And we want the local experts at the same table with us. So that would be a tremendous loss if we saw that. So we're looking to see how we can support and subgrant and do whatever we can for those smaller community-based organizations as national nonprofits. During the pandemic, there was a huge shortage of volunteers due to the safety implications, of course. So many volunteers are in that higher risk category. I will say that a huge lesson learned was creativity in how we deployed volunteers, how we housed volunteers, and even digital volunteerism that we saw a huge increase in that I hope we keep. Now, as the population becomes more vaccinated, we're seeing mandates being lifted, which is wonderful. However, nonprofits are trying to navigate what the policies are in regards to deploying their workforce. Are they requiring vaccinations? Are they looking at vaccinated numbers to the communities that they are deploying to? Are they mandating certain restrictions as far as keeping social distancing, masks, et cetera? All of these things that we have became very used to and are quickly becoming very unused to them, right? As we try to crawl our way out of this pandemic, but we know due to the Delta variant that it is far from over. So there's a real challenge as to trying to make these decisions and discern as the government is releasing these mandates, and nonprofits want to keep their workforce safe, their volunteers safe, and the communities that they are serving and traveling to often safe. So that's a huge challenge right now. And I will just say that, we've all mentioned the unprecedented year that 2020 was, both as a pandemic and natural disasters, and we're seeing a continuous increase in those billion-dollar disasters. Since 1980, NOAA has tracked billion-dollar disasters, which, if you're unfamiliar with that term, those are disasters that cause more than 1 billion in damage to communities. In 2020, there were 22 disasters that caused over $1 billion, and that's the most ever on record. And I'll just tell you that that number has doubled in the previous 2 decades, from 63 in the early 2000s to 123 in the second decade there. It takes all of us to come to the table to figure this out, because billions of dollars, no one's got that bank account, and that's not even to take into account the tremendous loss of life and trauma that communities experience. So I think a huge takeaway is that we saw the creativity in all of the partners coming to the table to figure out these enormous hurdles, and I think we need to continue that and to not just come to the table, but stay at the table.
Catherine, sincere thanks, and real concern certainly about, as you mentioned, maybe up to a third of the not-for-profits are, potentially threatened over the next several years, and that's something obviously we all need to look at very closely. Jason McNamara, changing a lens slightly, although certainly within the same wider domain. You've had nearly 30 years of emergency management engagement on the federal, state, and local levels. What do you think the greatest lessons learned have been for the emergency management community throughout this crisis? I'm going to suggest, perhaps with the concurrence of others, that while Jason works through his audio, I'm going to go to...
Check 1, 2. Can you hear me now?
There we go, Jason.
All right. I don't know what happened. I was on the right microphone.
This is all about emergency management. You handle it well.
Exactly. In any event, what I said was, because I don't work for the government anymore, I can be a little provocative here, so I'm gonna do that. The main issue that I think folks need to take away from COVID is, frankly, twofold. Main issues, are twofold. Number one is we really need to stop thinking about disasters in terms of seasonality, in terms of cycles, in terms of, okay, we'll get some time off. Even you and I was guilty of that when working in the business for as many years as I did. Usually between about December and February, you had a little bit of time off in terms of national disasters. That is not the case anymore. There really is no disaster season. As was just pointed out, the $1 billion disasters are going up. So That has implications, significant implications for both federal, state, local, nonprofits, the military, in terms of their posture, when they're able to respond, how they can keep people trained up. And it's going to have a significant, I think, very significant impacts on overall plans, processes, training, moving forward. You're not going to have kind of the other duties as assigned jobs that you'll see in other organizations now. They're going to be people dedicated to incident management on a full-time basis. Some of you may be surprised, but FEMA really does still use the kind of, for lack of a better word, the volunteer model during disasters. There's a small cadre of people that work incidents on a regular basis, but when the big ones come, they really have to kind of either use surge support or use different parts of the agency. I see that changing. I see that becoming more regularized. Second thing is with respect to emergency management relationship with the private sector. One of the things that came out of COVID was usually when you're responding to a disaster, the whole issue is taking things that from other places, things that exist, things that there is plenty of supply of, and moving them into the impacted area to address the problems. That could be generators, that could be food, that could be water, that could be a variety of things. What COVID brought to the fore, and it's now a major issue that people are considering, is what happens when those resources aren't available? What do you do in a resource scarce environment? What if there is no PPE? What if there is what if there aren't enough pharmaceuticals to go around? What are the next steps there, and who is responsible for that? And a lot of that was figured out, as I think many of you know, on the fly during the disaster. I think FEMA is spending a lot of time rethinking what its interactions with the private sector look like, what are the priorities, and as opposed to kind of the old way of thinking where FEMA, will fill in the gaps that are created by the disaster, it's really more of a matter of how do we reestablish what was there before, and particularly in a resource scarcity environment, how do we look to other and new partners to bring those resources in where desired. So I think it's going to have I know it's already had significant changes in the way people are thinking about incident management. And I do encourage all those folks watching to kind of stay tuned and frankly become engaged. I think there's a big opportunity now for the private sector to become more engaged in a way that they believe is most effective, and how they can be most effective during disasters. And I think FEMA, state and local governments are open to that now. Thanks, Bill, and I'm sorry for the tech difficulties.
No problem. And that's all part of the equation here. Jason, sincere thanks. Appreciate the insights. Colonel Kavanaugh, I wanted to keep you at the end because quite frankly, you have the largest lens on all of this. You're a warfighter, Army strategist. You've done substantial work also in the academic community, reflecting on much of this. What do you see as the greatest lessons, both for our military going forward, but also those that might be applicable to wider society, if you will?
So thanks, Bill. And when I think about national security in whole of community challenges, it makes me want to walk you through some global headlines. So late 2019, an Iranian missile attack wrecks 2 Saudi oil fields, a direct military strike on a soft target in the homeland critical to national infrastructure or society's essential needs. And oil to Saudi Arabia is about as essential as it gets. Russia's repeatedly crippled the Ukrainian power grid. Russia's used Novichok, an advanced chemical weapon, to carry out an attack in the United Kingdom. In 2015, China hacked the US Office of Personnel Management and stole 4 million federal employee records, including myself and probably a couple others on this panel. And Kim Jong-un, I saved my favorite for the end, leading North Korea with roughly the same economic size as the economy of Colorado Springs, can threaten far-off cities with strategic strike. And let me double down on that. So the North Korean GDP is less than half what Americans spend on their pets every year, and he has long-range nukes. So the tools to strike are cheaper than ever. and homelands are getting harder than ever before. I didn't even bring up the Colonial Pipeline. So wars changed, and it's not exclusively nuclear. The doomsday clock has been set closer to midnight than ever before, but nuclear weapons are down over 80% from their Cold War high. So there's two parts in the challenges to national security, in my mind, going forward. What's most valuable to us is now most vulnerable to our adversaries. They have the tools to inflict pain without all the muss and fuss of a nuclear weapon. Second, and this one rattles me a little bit, our American sense of camouflage containment won't hold anymore. By that, I mean the idea that war can be restricted to a battlefield, or that those of us in uniform can keep the consequences from those not in uniform. It's so much more likely now that when the nation next goes to war, war will come to the nation. So Catherine mentioned whatever it takes. And that is probably the motto for everybody that's standing here on this Zoom call. She's absolutely right. But if I had one wish, I'd add one word. It's whatever it takes together, because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to make this work. So thanks so much for your time, Bill. And thanks to everybody else on the panel today.
I'm going to actually lead off. We have a brief period of time remaining. Maybe I'm going to stay with you, Colonel, and ask if there was if you could make that a little more actionable. If you had to choose one particular actionable takeaway that you could charge all of us with going forward, what would it be?
Okay. It used to be, frankly, that we dealt with the four horsemen of the apocalypse individually. But today it seems much, much more likely that we're going to face them all at once. It takes a team to fight those four horsemen. And bear with me just momentarily. I have small kids, and a lot of you would know the book, Shel Silverstein's book, The Missing Piece. It's a pretty simple concept. It's a little character that looks like Pac-Man, and he rolls through the whole book looking for someone to make him whole. And I think of all these organizations represented on this panel like individually missing pieces. The only way that we're going to make this work is if we layer our work together on top of one another to make a completed whole. We've all got strengths. You know, we're either a helping hand, or we build back, or we're a local face, or security and unique assets. And we all want to protect and safeguard Americans. So if you ask me, it's a lot of handshakes, it's conversations like these, it's getting to know people before the worst happens.
Thank you. And I'm going to follow through with the deference, hopefully, of our wider mentors here, or I should say MCs. Jason, a really quick takeaway that you think is actionable.
Yeah, I'll follow on to that, which is, yes, everybody's got to get on board. And frankly, it's got to be much more institutionalized than it already is. I think, and I'm not saying that everybody's going to follow the same playbook, but it cannot be a pickup team, to continue on this analogy. People have to get engaged. We have to recognize that in order to be successful, that full team has to be engaged. And then third, how do you do that in a way that regularizes it, institutionalizes it, and you can turn on a dime on it? That's really what's required in this day and age with the threats that we face. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Catherine, your take.
Thank you. I would just echo what's been said in that, reach across the table, across the industry lines before the event happens. Events like today are so critical. You don't want to be meeting someone for the first time after a disaster has hit. So meet someone new, exchange a business card, and be honest about what you have and what you don't have. I think we often like to save face, say, here's what I have, here's what I don't have. How can we move forward?
And Colonel, tying a bow on it, what would you suggest?
Yes, sir. And so I just want to echo what the rest of the panel members said, with a heavy footstep on increased collaboration with NGOs and nonprofit organizations and other federal agencies, because we need to learn how to better collaborate and share information so that we're all operating with the same shared understanding. So.
Terrific. And sincere thanks to all of you, to DHS, certainly Northcom, and of course to the U.S. Chamber.